Hold on a minute. Come on. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Am I sideways or you're sideways?
I see you as being sideways. We'll give it a couple minutes for some people to join too.
Okay, let me try to readjust here so we're in the same direction.
I understand.
There we go. Let's see if that's better.
All right. And how are you?
Hello.
Um,
Hey. Okay. So we'll get started a little bit. I see we have a couple people that have already joined us. I see somebody's upside down.
That
Or
me? Yeah,
sideways.
hello, I'm Keith.
Hi, nice to meet you. All right, so those of us that are joining, I'm Stephanie, and we're here with Serena today. So let me tell you what brings us together. Who are we? We are the community of writers who are united by our passion for writing and a common challenge, word improv. What is word improv? A writing challenge where writers write a story using a set of new words. A story is broadly defined to include a tale, a poem, a skit, etc. There is no character minimum or limit. You can learn new words and participate in word improv by following Word Sleuth at Word Sleuth on Instagram. So what is the purpose of the interview today? This is part of a series of Pass-the-Baton interviews where contributors to the Word Improv Challenge interview one another so that our community and audience learns about word improv writers and their work. So we are here with Serena today and to learn a little bit more about her. So let me go over her bio real quick and then we'll get started today, okay? All right. So a little bit about Serena. She said well, Serena, do you want to go over your bio or do you want me to do it?
You can do it if you want.
That's fine. It's early. I'm a hot mess today, so it's okay. All right, so Serena had wrote a bio, and it says that she writes novels for the curious and the adventurous, for people who are intrigued by what happens if scenario, and who likes to explore the outcomes. Her characters are ordinary people who find out that they are capable of extraordinary things and discover that one person can truly make a difference. After receiving her BA in art history and political science from the Barnard, did I say that correct? Barnard. She graduated from the Fordham University School of Law. She then worked for 5 years at the Bronx District Attorney's Office, where she prosecuted sex crimes and child abuse cases. After leaving, she published a true crime memoir, Bronx DA, True Stories from the Sex Crimes and Domestic Violence Unit. In 2010, her book sold as a TV pilot to CBS Paramount. I want to see that, by the way. She's gone on to publish numerous legal articles and works of poetry and was an editor for a legal magazine for a few years. She also a talking head commenting on current criminal cases in the media and TV and radio. Today, she lives in Hudson Valley, New York, with her husband and 2 children, also budding writers, 2 naughty Labrador Retriever ladies, and 2 barn cat boys. She's now working on sequels for her debut novel. Okay, I gotta ask, how do you say that name for your debut novel?
It's called Reinception.
Reinception. Okay. And she's going to keep everybody posted. She also states, when not writing or being a lawyer, she loves to scuba dive, take photographs, travel off the beaten path, and swamp diving or courtroom stories with you all day long, happily talking. I mean, you're very interesting, Serena. I have to tell you that.
Thank you.
I'm intrigued and I'm excited to be here with you today. And you're going to share your favorite word imprompt, correct?
Yeah, I'll share that with you. So what I'm trying to do is use the improv words to create an ongoing story. And it's interesting because I don't know where the story is going to go. It's kind of going to depend on the words. So I'm going to share part one, and part two is soon to be released, I believe. Um, and part one is called The Uncle. I know it's an un-American thing to say, but I've always hated Thanksgiving. Big holiday gatherings with my family were always fraught with tension, and never more so than on that beer-drinking, football-watching, gluttonous farce of a celebration. National Beat Your Wife Day is what we called it at the police department, but I knew that's what it was long before I joined the force. It was a top-down kind of thing. First, there was my cockalorum grandmother and her oldest male offspring, a rotten apple from a perfidious tree, if I ever did see one. It wasn't just his bellicose nature that made my hair stand on end, but what I was always sure was a prurient interest in his nieces, myself included. My aunt either couldn't or wouldn't see it. Instead of worrying about what actually mattered, she focused on her petty pendant criticism of everything that came out of our mouths. Back then, she was the word police. Now I'm the real police. Obviously, my choice of professions wasn't inadvertent, but this is not how I thought I'd spend my life. When I was little, I dreamed I'd be a painter or a school teacher or maybe even a ballerina. But Thanksgiving of 2012 to be exact, that was the linchpin in my career decision path. And it all started with my uncle, a bowl of clan dip, a half-eaten bag of chips, and the puppy bowl. But that's a story for next time.
I'm really intrigued. I'm excited to learn more about you today because there's just a lot to it. And my big question is, how do you find the time for everything?
It's really hard. I have two teenagers, and I spend a lot of time writing in parking lots when I'm driving them from place to place. And the car is actually a great place to write because nobody can really bother me there. It's usually, after work hours. But you make the time where you can find it. Airplanes are also a favorite spot. If I could be on an airplane once a week, just so I could have that like white noise and write, that would be great. But I can't.
Yeah, I can't imagine how challenging it can be between everything. But we do have the time in the day to get things done. We just have to like focus and concentrate sometimes. Um, I'm always on the run, so I totally get it.
Yeah, it's hard.
And I see that you love to take photographs. That's something I love to do too, so I totally get that too. So one of my questions for you is, did you always have an interest in writing?
Actually, I didn't. What really got me interested in writing, as you mentioned in my bio, my first job out of law school was in the Bronx District Attorney's Office, where I prosecuted mostly crimes against children. And two things got me writing. The first was prosecutors are really storytellers. And ultimately, when you get a case and you're trying to assemble it, you're thinking right away about how am I going to present this to a jury? What is the cohesive story that I'm going to be able to tell them about what happened? So in a way, you're a story writer in that line of work as a lawyer. And then I started writing poetry just as a means of catharsis. Crimes against children is obviously a pretty heavy area to work in. So I started writing the poems, and that kind of evolved into a book. And my first book that came out was nonfiction. I call it a true crime memoir about the work I did at the DA's office. And then from there, I just couldn't stop.
And where can we find your poetry if we want to check it out?
So I published individual poems in a few different places, but in my book, Bronx DA, True Stories from the Sex Crimes and Domestic Violence Unit, each chapter starts with a poem I wrote, and all those poems are about either experiences I had or things that I saw or cases that I worked on. So that's where most of the poems are.
Yeah, poetry is a really great way to get anything off your chest and release any kind of form of expression. Um, so I think that's fantastic. And I know you said writing, kind of came later on because prosecutors are storytellers in a sense. So my question is, what about your first novel? You'd mentioned that you'd already completed one, right?
Yeah, well, so my first book was nonfiction but I had a book that came out in October that's actually science fiction. That's called Reinception, and it's envisioned as part of a trilogy. And how that came about, it was also definitely a circuitous route to writing science fiction. I started after Bronx DA working on a couple of crime novels, which seemed like it would kind of be the natural progression for a prosecutor and somebody who wrote a true crime book. And I do know a lot of former prosecutors who are writers and write true crime. And I did complete one novel, and I just found, that my heart wasn't in it, and I wanted to write something that was a little more escapist. And I did write a couple other books before Reinception hit. I think, a lot of us, it takes hard work to get that first novel published. So I had a YA alien invasion story that I wrote, and then I got the idea for Reinception. Actually, I was reading a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And at the same time, I came across this article about a process called transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a therapy that is mostly used for depression, but they're also studying application in habit modification. So I started thinking about, what would that be like if we could just change our habits in, like that? And what would be the unforeseen consequences of that kind of technology? And from there, the novel evolved. And I think science fiction is my favorite genre to read. So it's also been just a joy to write. I really love it.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you what your favorite genre in reading was, because a lot of writers, a lot of times, end up writing something completely different than what they read. I mean, at least so I've heard. Like, what I write, I read completely different of that genre as well. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
And
I read across genres. I pretty much love every genre, but I don't love romance. I like it when there are romantic elements in a different kind of book, but I don't really read romance novels. But I do read across genres, and I read two different ways. Sometimes I'm reading just for enjoyment, and sometimes I'm reading to learn. And I might pick a book that I wouldn't read otherwise because I'm trying to learn something from it as a writer. So, but yeah, I'll read anything that's well written, really.
yeah, I mean, it's good to gain different perspectives and stuff and just learn something new along the way. So what's the most difficult part in the process of writing for you?
Um, the hardest part for me is getting through to the end and resisting that urge to constantly go back over things that you've already written. And, the general wisdom, and I think it's good advice, is get the book done and then go back and fix it. But I'm also always working on a few projects at a time. And sometimes if I put it away long enough, I want to go back and review something. And it's hard to resist the urge to just keep editing the beginning and never get past it to the end.
I understand that. I think that's something a lot of us connect with, and I apologize for the noise in the background. Don't mind my little tornado. And can you tell us more about the sequels that you're working on?
Yeah.
And I know that's in regards to your novel, right?
Yeah, so Reinception is part of a trilogy. Book one, as I said, is out. And book two, I've completed the outline and started the writing process. So I'm hoping it will be, ready for print sometime in the fall. That's, if I can resist the urge to keep going back over the first few chapters and get through it. But I do have, I do know where the book is going and have a pretty solid outline. So I think I'm going to be able to start progressing pretty well.
That's good. And I was going to actually ask you, do you publish independently or through somebody else?
I'm with a traditional publisher. It's a small press called Winding Road Stories. And they're a relatively new press. They've been around for, I guess, about a year and a half now. And it's been really a joy to work with them and be part of kind of one of the founding authors of a new press and have that kind of, energy around building the imprint and building success. And the other authors are phenomenal. It's just a lovely community. I feel really, really fortunate that they picked up the book.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, that was going to be one of my other questions. I mean, I have so many questions I could ask you, Serena. Like I said, you're a very interesting person. And I love the fact that you highlighted that you find the time when you can, whether it's in a car or airplane, because that is so relatable to many of us.
Yeah.
Kind of goes the same way with reading. It's when we have a moment kind of thing. And what do you think your readers connect the most with on your writing?
Generally the feedback is the relatability of the characters. They're not perfect people. They're struggling to kind of find themselves and with their inner demons. And like I said in the bio, it's really ultimately about the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. I think there's a lot of books out there, a lot of great books, where people have, special powers or abilities or, backgrounds that give them an edge. And I specifically set Reinception with college age students. It's kind of a narrow category, and you don't often see college age students in books. You see them, I think, a lot more in movies and on TV. But it's such a pivotal time where, you're kind of exploring your identity and your autonomy. It's, the first time you're really on your own and seeing, what you're capable of and making your own decisions. So I think it's just a really interesting phase of life to write about.
Yeah, I like that age category that you picked and stuff. And I don't know. For me, I would think that would be the people that would be most interested in reading it as well as within that age group. And I think that gives you an advantage with that perspective and stuff. And it's very true. When you published your first novel, what was the most rewarding part of it, or how did you feel once you actually got it published and out there for your first book?
I mean, publishing fiction, I found it to be a lot harder than publishing nonfiction. It's a really different process, and it's a difficult transition in a lot of ways. When you're writing nonfiction, you can sell it on a proposal. So I actually had written the entire book before I sold Bronx DA, but I found out afterwards that, you don't have to do that. You can sell a proposal with some sample chapters, and then once the book is picked up, write it. So you don't have to invest the way you do in fiction in actually completing something that may never get picked up. And promoting nonfiction is also much easier than promoting fiction, because you have a topic that will relate to things that are going on in the world. And not to say that can't happen in fiction, but it's a lot easier to get spots and interviews and things like that when you're talking about something like crime, and you can connect that to, crime going on in the real world. So it was kind of a long, hard path to learn how to write fiction. I'm educated, but I didn't study writing in school other than, legal writing or the, the writing everybody studies. So I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to study. It took, like I said, writing a couple of books to get it right and be ready for publication. And then, of course, when you finish the book and you submit it and you write the end, and that's such a great day. You feel so good when you get to that last page. But you're really not done. You have to do your own edits. And then if you work with an agent, your agent's going to have edits. And then when the agent sends it to the publisher, the editor at the publishing house is going to have edits. So until it's actually in print, I feel like I couldn't, holding that first, paper book in my hands, that was like, okay, I finally did it.
It's a pretty great feeling once you do get to hold your own book, knowing all that work that you've put in, that time, that effort, and Like, I did it. I actually made it to the finish line, finally.
It's here, it's here. And I actually, there's an audiobook of Reinception, and that was really, I was honestly so proud of it, and maybe in some ways more than the print book, because I love audiobooks, and I worked with this phenomenal narrator. It was not an easy book to narrate. There's different characters. I invented an entire language. So she had to invent an accent for a language that doesn't exist 100 years in the future. And she did such a good job. I was so happy with how it came out and so proud. And I felt so lucky to collaborate with my narrator. So that was a really good day too.
Now, I have to ask, you created another language? Now, I have to find out more about that. So did you make up a language? I mean, and where did that idea come from?
Yes. So I envision this society 100 years in the future where it's a much more multiracial society. People are much more mixed race, mixed culture, mixed religion. And my kind of sad conclusion is that if we're not going to divide ourselves by our skin color, our religion, or our ethnicity, we'll find some other way to do it. So in this future world, there's a caste system, and kind of the serving caste are called the prole, and they have a patois that I created, and it's really it's kind of a lot. The words are, a lot of them are made up, but it's also a combination of a lot of different languages, because I believed a lot of different cultures and ethnicities would be contributing to the language that they speak. So I pulled a lot from all different languages, but there's a lot in there I pulled from Singaporean street slang, because if you ever listen to it, it almost sounds like a futuristic language. It's almost like talking the way we text. Everything is kind of truncated and abbreviated and like very quick. So there's a lot of that influence in there too. So it was fun. It was interesting to write. And a big piece of feedback from people on the novel is I have a glossary at the end, and a lot of them just the glossary was at the beginning.
You said made another language. I'm like, that's amazing. And that's incredible creativity that I don't think some people think about sometimes. So, yeah, that has my attention. And, just because we just mentioned the language that you made up, where do you get your creativity from when you're writing these books and you come up with these ideas like that?
I think a lot of it is there's the initial inspiration, but I also find that the book tells me a lot in the editing. So I find that, I usually do several rewrites, and I find, especially if you put the book aside for a little bit of time and come back to it, you'll find that you planted like all these seeds of, intrigue and ideas that can be worked into the book. So sometimes the things are in there subconsciously, or sometimes there's something in there that doesn't really connect well to something else, and you have to say, well, how did this come about, and how do I do it? So a lot of it is in the rewriting process, and I used to really dread the rewrites, but that's made me enjoy it more, to like try to find these Easter eggs really in my own novel is kind of a cool process. And then just, the world around me and what's inspired me. There's a lot in Reinception about unintended consequences, and that definitely comes from my legal background. So it seems like there's really no connection between sci-fi and being an attorney or being a prosecutor, but I think thinking about unintended consequences is very much of a legal mindset, and a lot of my inspiration came from looking at current technologies and things going on in the world and saying, okay, what could be the consequences of this? How might this play out? So yeah, really from everywhere.
Yeah, I could see that, and I totally get the whole rewrite thing. It's something I've always dreaded too, but you're absolutely right. I don't know what it is. When you're writing, it's like you don't think of some of those components, but when you go back, all of a sudden new ideas and everything starts to get inspired, and that's where you really start to piece it together when you go over your writing over and over again.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's what makes it difficult to stop going over it sometimes.
Definitely, definitely. Like tweaking every little word. There's always something you can change, right?
I've learned this the hard way, but I understand. And with your books and stuff, obviously you do your research and everything, and you're very knowledgeable on the stuff that you write about. What advantage do you think working in your field's given you with writing these books?
Working what?
What advantages do you think that you have gained writing these books and stuff with your knowledge? Do you think that's been a huge player in the way that you write and the ideas that you come up with?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think a lot about unintended consequences, and Reinception is very much about that. And I start each chapter with like a little snippet of things that have gone on in the last 100 years. So instead of dumping that somewhere in the novel, finding a place to info dump and tell people what happened in the last 100 years that we are where we are when the book starts.
Mm-hmm.
I start actually from like 2 years in the past with the first snippet, and then each entry, it's chronological, but it tells you a different thing about the world, like what has happened to technology, what has happened to the climate. There's a lot about our laws. So how would this technology be handled legally? I think a lot about privacy, about modification of children. So if you could use this technology to take away depression or to help with something like ADHD, would you do that for your child instead of putting them on medication, for example? And how does that affect their rights if it's permanent? What should or shouldn't parents do? What can or can't you modify? So there is a lot in there about the law. There are things about the criminal justice system. So all of that background that I had definitely played into how this novel played out. And then I think a lot of the influence is other stuff in my life. Like you said earlier, I do a lot of different things. I was actually an art major in college. So I love the creative process. I always have. And I want to be using kind of both sides of my brain when I'm writing and exploring like creativity. And it's really important to me that the story has to be great, the plot has to be great, but the actual writing is really important to me too, that when people read the sentences, they enjoy them and they find them to be beautiful or well written. So, and I think a lot of that's my art background, actually.
I think that's interesting. I love the fact that you have an art background. That's one of my favorite things as well. Man, I just had a question that just fleeted from my brain. Probably because I have so much that I want to learn about you. I definitely want to check out your book without a doubt because it just has my curiosity stirring to find out more about it. I had another question for you, and I can't remember what it was. What advice would you give someone who wants to write in this genre?
I think the hardest thing about science fiction and the biggest problem I see when I'm looking at, like, especially critiquing other people's works in progress, is info dumping. So you're doing a lot of world building in science fiction, and it can be really difficult to resist the urge to just info dump and tell your reader up front everything that's going on in the world. And that often causes the books to be, very expository, which I think exposition really has to be used very sparingly in writing. Otherwise, it can drag. It can really hurt the pacing. So I think some of it is to, if you need to info dump in your first iteration of the book just to kind of get it on the page, that's fine. But then really be thoughtful about what do you actually have to tell the reader right up front, and what can you weave into the story, and really study other science fiction novels that do it really well to see how they kind of slowly spool out that information. And that way you can also create curiosity, like what is going on in this world? Like, where am I? What's happening? I think Divergent is a young adult series, and I thought the first book in particular really stands out as as doing this really, really well, where the book starts where this girl is sitting in front of a mirror talking about how she's not allowed to look in a mirror and she can only cut her hair, and her mother. And right away, you're like, okay, you know, you're not here. You're like, where am I? What's going on? Why does she have these rules? And it makes you want to keep reading instead of, you know, all the answers thrown at you at the beginning. So that's my advice: is spool out the information thoughtfully.
I think that's really good advice. Do you have any authors that you love to read that definitely are some of your favorites as far as that genre goes?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot. I love Philip K. Dick novels. That's a lot of my inspiration for Reinception. I think it's, you know, kind of built the way he builds novels. I love Blake Crouch. It's, you know, some of it's very thriller. It's like sci-fi thrillers, but he's so good at it. He's so creative and he's so good at building tension. I love his stuff. And I've been reading the Martha Wells, the Murderbot Diaries I'm working my way through now. And they're just very clever. They're really, really clever. And they're short. So if you don't have a ton of time to read, but you like science fiction, like a lot of science fiction books are tomes, you know, and her book is
Yes.
very digestible. Yeah. And of course, Andy Weir, you know, there's a lot. I could keep going.
I can tell you definitely do a lot of reading, and you're very passionate about the genre you do write on. And I think that's pretty incredible. And I was going to ask our alternate if he had any questions for you. Are you there with us? Well, any fun facts you want to share that of what people should? I mean, I know we're going to expect some sequels and stuff from you. I was going to ask. I can't think this morning. I'm sorry. Do you have a website or anything to where people can find out more about you?
Yeah, I'm the only Serena Strauss out there. So even if you spell my name wrong, my name gets misspelled all the time. It's Sarena and Strauss with one S, Straus. So people usually spell Serena with an E or an I, but you'll find me. I'm the only Serena Strauss that'll come up, and my website's serenastrauss.com, and my Instagram is Serena Strauss, and my Twitter is Serena Strauss. So I'm consistent, and I'm easy to find, and I'm trying to be good about keeping my website up to date. I have a newsletter that I don't publish it regularly. I just publish it when I have information to share. So hopefully it's a good newsletter to subscribe to, because I'm not, you know, some newsletters you join because people have content that they're putting out regularly and you enjoy the content, and that's great. But some people, like, I just feel so overwhelmed by email that sometimes I don't want I don't want weekly content. So yeah, if you subscribe to my newsletter, I promise I will not fill up your inbox, and you'll only hear from me when I have something to share. And I guess the other thing is I'm going to be at NorwestCon in April. I don't remember the exact dates, but it's a sci-fi fantasy convention in Washington State, and I'll be there with my publisher. It's at the Seattle, right by the Seattle SeaTac Airport, and I'm very excited for that. It sounds really, really cool and fun, and I'm so excited to like meet other authors and watch all the cosplay. I don't know if I'll participate in the cosplay, but I love watching it.
I would think it would be fun to participate if you did, but I totally get the hesitation and stuff. Sometimes maybe you just want to go check it out, and then maybe in the future you'll join in the next time. I know that's how I am. I want to sit and observe first, and then maybe I'll join in, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't want to send a confusing message. I'm there as an author, and to, you know, with my publisher to, you know, to give out our books. And I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love dressing up. My son was born on Halloween, so Halloween is like a huge favorite in this house. So yeah, like you said, maybe next time.
Yeah, I just find, sometimes it's more comfortable to sit and observe, like I said. I know that's how I am. I tend to be a wallflower to where I want to watch everything first, and then maybe I'll go play and join.
Yeah, exactly.
But I could see how you said, that might be a bit confusing, so I can understand that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've gone over what's going to be next and expected from you, your website, how we can find your work and stuff. I'm definitely going to check out your stuff. It's on my bucket list now.
Thank you.
Um, I actually love crime stuff and justice stuff. It intrigues the heck out of me, which is completely opposite of what I do.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I guess another thing I can share that people ask me a lot about the process of pitching Bronx DA to television. And the pilot was, as you mentioned, bought by CBS Paramount. It wasn't made. There was CBS had one slot that year, and it went to J.J. Abrams and not our team, which is hard to fault. But I did work with a TV writer, so I had a friend who actually introduced me to a TV writer who was looking. She works a lot in shows about criminal justice and law and stuff like that, and she was looking for something. So I was really a consultant on that project, and it was a very fictionalized version of my story. It took a lot of my story in the cases and then made it, a lot more exciting for TV, I would say. So, I think some writers try to straddle that, to write scripts for TV or for movies. It wasn't something, I was still learning about the writing process to write books, and I wanted to focus on novels, and it was really helpful to have somebody who'd written before, who she had agents and managers and connections and was able to put together all the pitches. Like I wasn't going in cold as somebody who Hollywood had never heard of. So I guess, I mean, that would be my advice, is kind of, if you really want to get stuff out there, try to work with some professionals, and, take a stab at writing the script if that's what you want to do, but get good support and advice. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important to reach out. It's the only way we learn is by getting that advice and, learning. And it's part of the process. That's the beautiful part of being a writer, is it's a process.
Yeah.
You kind of, it's just, you discover new things throughout it. So I thank you for joining us. Like I said, it's been intriguing getting to know you, your projects and stuff. I would encourage anybody, if you've been joining in on this interview today, to check out her work. And this is Pass-the-Baton interview number 19, if I can talk. And join us next week, I believe, for Pass-Baton 20, where you can find us. You can invite people to learn new words, participate in the word imprompt by following Word Sleuth on Instagram. If you'd like to get involved, all you have to do is DM Word Sleuth. Feel free to remind people to follow us, and feel free to provide any additional contact information, such as website or links. But by all means, anybody can join in on the word imprompts and check out Serena's work. She sounds intriguing, and I can't wait to see what comes next for you.
Thank you so much. It was fun to talk to you.
It was a pleasure. I'll check out your work here in the next couple of weeks, okay? You have a great day, and thank you for joining us.
You too. Thank you.
Bye, Serena.
Bye-bye.